am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone? Anyone? Can anyone hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something. Please.
She had fallen into a world of pure darkness. No matter how far she walked, nothing would change. It was a blanket of shadows no matter where she went.
It's so quiet here, and yet sometimes I swear I hear something. Something like scratching?
If whatever was making the scratching sounds didn't kill her, the boredom certainly would. She'd brought nothing with her except for the bat and pocket knife she always carried. Would she be trapped here for eternity? Surely not. Surely this would end somehow, either by being rescued or starving to death. But like the world around her, nothing about herself seemed to change, no matter how much time passed. She never got hungry or dirty. Everything was stagnant.
I'm starting to lose track of the time. Has it been days? Hours? If someone told me it's been years, I might believe them. In this place, I don't eat or drink anymore. I can't tell if I'm awake or dreaming. I can't even tell if I'm dead or alive. There's just nothing but pitch black silence. Except for the noise. That scratching noise I sometimes hear. This sounds crazy, but even though no one can hear me, when I hear that noise, I feel like someone's listening. Anyone, if you're there, thank you.
There was no other option. The darkness went on forever and no one was coming to save her. There was only one way out. She took out her pocket knife and plunged it into her own heart. But instead of dying, she was enveloped by a strange force, as if a cloud had enveloped her body. An entrance to the depths opened within her flesh, and a creature fused with her. Her body was twisted by the darkness, and she took on a new form. Part monster, part titan. And that is the answer to the title of this video. If all that you wanted was to know how I think Des became the knight, then you can stop watching here. Deltarune is just a couple days away at this point, so the rest of this video is just going to be gameplay footage of me being bad at dodging, because I am running out of time here. But if you want to hear why I think this is what happened to Des, what it could mean for Chapter 5, and some other predictions I want to squeeze out before the chapter drops, stick around as I yap about Deltarune. But first, huge thanks to Warp Willow for voicing Des in the intro, and to Reno for letting me use their sprites. Check them out in the description below. So, first, I'm not going to be talking about why I think Des is the knight. Tons of people have talked about that already. She's the most popular candidate. So, if you want to know why people think Des is the knight, there's like a billion other videos you can check out. Everyone's asking who's the knight, but never how is the knight, or why is the knight. Specifically, how did Des become the knight, and why is she the way she is? Well, like I implied in the intro, I think Des has become part Titan. We know that opening a dark fountain in a dark world summons the Titan. Presumably from the depths, though we don't know that for sure. It's kind of unclear exactly what the depths are. But anyway, point is, stabbing something in the dark world creates a Titan from it. And while we all know what happens when you stab the ground, we don't know what happens if you were to stab something other than the ground, such as a person. And while you might think it seems a little out of character for Des to stab herself, keep in mind she was lost in endless darkness for who knows how long. There is absolutely no way Des is still the exact same person after that experience. Even if there isn't some darkness force controlling her, there is no way Des has the same personality as before after going through all of that. I should also point out that since Des was into military stuff because of the MREs in her room, it doesn't seem too unrealistic for her to carry a knife with her, as people in the service often do that. And also, perhaps Chris picked up that habit of carrying their knife everywhere from Des. or maybe they didn't do it in the past, but then after Des went missing, they kind of started doing it to sort of honor Des, or to try to, like, I don't know, be Des. I'm not sure. There's a few things you can interpret from that. Another thing I want to point out, you know how when the knight roars, there's that eye-looking thing in their chest? Well, what if it's not an eye and it's instead a stab hole? It's pixel art, so it's, you know, you can't say for sure. It's very much open to interpretation, but that could be where she stabbed herself. I know that in the story I said, you know, she stabbed herself in the heart. It doesn't necessarily have to be there. It can be anywhere, really. Anywhere lethal, I should say. This next bit of evidence is pretty solid, and I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. The knight almost certainly has something to do with the Titans, and likely is a Titan in some way. In Chapter 2, when Rousey is explaining what the roaring is, we get this visual aid of the Titans. In the middle, we see a Titan with horns that doesn't really look like the one we saw in Chapter 4, other than it being like a big, wide creature, but we also don't get a super good look at its whole body, mainly just the head. But on either side of that Titan in the middle are two other Titans that look almost exactly like the Roaring Knight, just with a different face. They even have the little gaster hands that the Knight has. So we can say for relative certainty that the Knight is almost certainly linked to the Titans in some way, most likely part Titan. Even if my theory about Des stabbing herself isn't true, somehow she became part Titan. Also worth noting that's kind of odd is that there are two Knights there. Why is that the case? Well, I'll come back to that later. Okay, so the main part of the theory, you know, I've discussed, right? You know, I think Des stabbed herself and all of that, and became part Titan. The rest of the discussion about this theory is going to be some further theories and possibilities that could be true, assuming that I'm right about Des being part Titan. Starting with what the goal is of Knight Incorporated, or whatever this group is calling themselves. The Roaring Group Chat, I really like that name. Now, it's pretty clear what Carol's goal is, right? She wants to restore Des to how she was before becoming part Titan. What the Knight's goal is unclear unless they're working directly with Carol. If Des isn't trying to turn herself back to normal while working with Carol, then I have no idea what her goal could possibly be. The only thing I could think of is, like, I don't know, trying to open up Dark World so other people understand the pain she went through, but at that point, why not just cause the roaring? I don't know, I think it's more likely that Des and Carol are working together. So, what's Carol up to, and how does everyone play into this? Well, we know that Carol and Asgore are working together on something that seems to have been related to Asgore losing his job as police chief, which is most likely Des's disappearance. It's unclear how much Asgore knows, but he probably isn't aware that Chris is involved. That's all stuff you've probably heard before, but something interesting a lot of people don't seem to know, probably because they skipped this dialogue because they were mean to Alphys, is that Alphys mentions that Carol and Undyne went to the shelter together. I'm really not sure where Alphys is in this conspiracy, especially with her being set to be sacrificed later. But it seems like she may have been to the Dark World before. It's hard to say, and I'll get into why I think they're sacrificing Undyne in a little bit. Now, what is Carol's plan to get Des back exactly? How is she going to do this? Well, I think the answer definitely lies within the soul. I don't know how Carol and Chris got their hands on it, and I have no theories for that. That's probably something we'll learn about in Chapter 5. But I think what they're trying to do is use the soul to seal the dark fountain that has Des turned into a partial Titan. Every chapter, we seal a fountain, and we gain a level. Presumably, this is a sign that the soul is getting stronger. I think that this not only makes the party members stronger, but it also lets the soul do more powerful things. I mean, for example, the whole glowing thing that it does when the knight is attacking. The soul couldn't do that when the knight was attacking in Chapter 3, but suddenly it can do it in this section when the knight is throwing knives at everyone. Basically, I think that the reason that the knight is opening these fountains is because they're grinding for levels. Which, funnily enough, does parallel the weird route, because they are trying to get stronger. I will also say that's possible that Carol created some of the fountains. As the presumed head of the conspiracy, it does make sense that she would do something like that. I also want to do a quick side note here and mention that in the Chapter 5 trailer, there's that dark world that's all Japanese. And since Carol owns a katana, she's probably into Japanese stuff in some way. So it's possible that the dark fountain with the Japanese shrines is going to get made by Carol. So she'll either make it in Asgore's shop, or Asgore's shop will have a dark fountain, and another place will have a dark fountain made by Carol, such as maybe her office at the town hall. And whether or not Carol has been the one making the fountains, the knight is clearly involved in testing the soul as well. I think that's why the knight summoned a titan. Or I guess I should say that's why Des summoned a titan. I'm assuming the knight is Des. I think I could just start saying Des from now on. Basically, Des was trying to see if the soul could seal a titan. Because if it can seal a titan, it can probably help her. I'm also of the belief that the reason why Gerson was able to appear in that third dark world is because Des went and got Gerson's hammer and brought it to that dark world. She did this because she obviously doesn't want Chris to die, and certainly doesn't want the soul to be destroyed, because otherwise she's stuck as the knight forever. So it makes sense that she would go and get Gerson just to provide some level of insurance that they would survive. I don't think they're done testing things though. That line about police sacrifice next week, I think it's foreshadowing Undyne being turned into a knight. And that way they can test the soul's ability to cure partial titanness. I'm not sure what the next week part is. It might be unrelated. It could be Carol saying something like, I need this to be done by next week when Azrael visits. Something like that. Quick side note, because I forgot to come back to it like I said I would. The idea of Undyne being turned into a knight is my explanation for why there are two knights in the graphic from when Ralsei explains what the roaring is. I also think that we can figure out where Undyne is going to be stabbed. Specifically, I think she's going to be stabbed in her left eye. After the fountain around her is sealed, she is going to wear an eye patch like she did in Undertale. And technically, they could do this experiment multiple times on different people. Fortunately, there's no one else who's missing who could possibly be... Oh. Right. You. Okay, so here's the thing about Papyrus, right? We have no idea where he is. And it is very possible that he's already been knightified. But I don't know where on his body he would be stabbed in a way that makes thematic sense, how he'd end up in the Dark World, or even what narrative purpose this would serve besides Carol wanting to test the soul a second time. But I've got to throw a bone to the Papyrus Knight truthers somehow, because I was on Team Papyrus Knight back when we just had chapters 1 and 2. So there you go. I guess Papyrus technically could be a knight. Anyway, all that being said, I want to talk about how I think chapter 5 is going to end. First and foremost, I actually think that pretty much all of the stuff with the knight is going to more or less wrap up. I predicted that we're going to use the soul to seal the fountain around Des, and it kind of seems like that might be an endgame type of thing, but I think that's just going to be kind of the finale of chapter 5. Unfortunately, sealing the fountain around Des isn't going to save her. Remember, she stabbed herself in a lethal area. I think that the darkness around her kind of acted as a seal to prevent her body from succumbing to the stab wound, and would also prevent blood loss if Des has blood. It's unclear whether or not monsters have blood in this timeline, or if Des even is a monster, really. There's a lot of people who think that she could be human. But anyway, I think sealing the fountain around Des will unintentionally kill her. This may or may not be the final tragedy. I mean, if it says that the girl dies, that girl could be Des, and it's not Susie or Noelle, like a lot of people think. Though, honestly, I think that this stuff has a lot less to do with the prophecy. I think more prophecy-related stuff is gonna come to fruition in chapters 6 and 7. Anyway, Chris is definitely gonna crash out if Des dies. I think Chris is actually going to discard the soul because they don't have a need for it anymore. After pulling the soul out, Chris is going to do something crazy and drastic. Specifically, I think they are going to become a knight by stabbing their own hand. This is foreshadowed by the whole thing about Chris being implied to lose a hand from the gumball machine in chapter 3, as well as the knight knighting Chris, kind of implying that Chris himself may become a knight in the future. I'm not sure what Chris's plan would be after this, though I think they wouldn't even have one. I think this is going to be something that Chris does just totally out of emotion and just without thinking. And then finally, being without Chris, we'll only have one thing to turn to, which is of course the vessel that we made at the beginning of the game in the Goner Maker. Now that idea is kind of fanfiction-y, but you know, it's a way I could see things going. I could see this being a potential direction. I have no idea how the weird route would change things. Noelle being stronger is important in some way. The Spampton sweepstakes implied that the weird route might end with chapter 5. So I don't know if like you save Des from dying by freezing the whole world with Noelle. That could happen. I honestly have no idea. Now, this idea of like Chris becoming a knight and stabbing their own hand, that's kind of fan fiction, but it's been made very clear that chapter 5 is going to end with a dramatic shift in tone. Toby said in the newsletter that this is going to be like one final fun adventure, and I think things are really going to get crazy at the end of chapter 5. I think something irreversible is going to happen, and it's going to drastically shift the tone of the game when we go into chapter 6. Now, chapter 6 is kind of unknowable. It's really unclear what's going to happen. Like I said earlier, I have no idea what Chris's plan would be afterwards. I do think Chris is going to kind of become the villain, but I don't know if they're going to try to cause the roaring out of anger, or if we're just kind of trying to save them from themselves. It's unclear. With Chris crashing out, there's obviously going to be a party schism. We're obviously going to lose Chris, but some other party members might leave as well. Rousey's loyalty seems to lie with the player, so I don't think we would lose him, but it's really unclear what Susie would do in this situation. I have no idea how she would react to this. This is probably where Susie would find out that Chris has been possessed the whole time, and the person she thought she was interacting with was the player, and not actually Chris. But we've also been manipulating Chris this whole time, so she may still side with Chris out of sympathy. It's really hard to know. It's possible we would lose her temporarily and then get her back. I don't know. There's a lot to think about. The final boss of Chapter 7 honestly might be Chris. And the goal, starting with Chapter 6, is to seal the fountain that Chris created around themselves. Basically, Chapter 5 is going to focus on the tragedy of Hometown, and then 6 onwards is going to have more to do with greater world-ending threats that Chris may or may not be aligning himself with or trying to cause. So that's the end of my whole Des is part Titan theory, but I want to talk about some unrelated predictions that I have. So the Pure Crystal, right? What is it exactly? We know that the Shadow Crystals are made out of glass in some way, so presumably the Pure Crystal would be as well. But you know what else is made out of glass? The prophecy panels. So yes, I think the Pure Crystal is a prophecy panel. But I don't think it's a prediction. I think that it's a prophecy panel that's blank, and they can fill in whatever they like. What's in the prophecy already, including the final tragedy, is going to happen no matter what, and it can't be changed. But a new piece could be added to the end of the prophecy. Gerson foreshadows this when he talks about reinterpreting the prophecy for Lord of the Hammer in his optional boss fight. And he encourages Susie to do the same. And as the White Pen of Hope, Susie will probably be the one to write a new ending. The main issue with this theory is the fact that Deltarune is a video game and not everyone is going to get all of the crystals. So does this mean that the good ending is locked behind beating all of the secret bosses, including the knight? I don't know, that seems a little bit too tall of an order. But it could be something that kind of softens the blow of whatever is to come without changing the ending. From the beginning, Toby Fox has said that Deltarune will only have one ending, but some things are more important than reaching the ending. So I think the pure crystal is going to be kind of part of that. It won't totally change the ending, but it'll change some of the context of it, maybe. So for example, if the final tragedy is Jockington gets a tummy ache, then Susie could write a new prophecy panel saying Jockington receives free Pepto-Bismol. Jockington still would have the tummy ache, but it would immediately be mitigated by the free Pepto. That's obviously a very silly example, and there are some things like death that could not be reversed with a prophecy panel like that, but I don't know, there are a lot of things that could be done with Susie basically getting to have a free wish. Quick side note, something that I learned after recording this video is that if you use the Shadow Crystal in the room with the final prophecy, you get unique dialogue about Chris holding up the crystal to the prophecy expecting it to change, which implies that Chris believes that the Shadow Crystal can somehow change the final tragedy. Finally, I want to talk about something that no one talks about, and honestly, for good reason. It contradicts the main theory of this video, but I just find it odd that every member of the Holiday family, including Rudy, who is deathly ill, has been seriously considered as a knight candidate, except for Noelle. Obviously, this is due to Noelle not having knowledge of the Dark Worlds, and there's pretty much only one way that Noelle could be the knight, which is if she was the knight unconsciously. We know from the weird route that Noelle is susceptible to trances, so it's possible that she's been put under somehow. So it's possible that Noelle has been, like, hypnotized in some way to have a different knight personality, or maybe not even hypnotized. It could just be she developed a split personality due to the trauma of deaths. This would also explain why Carol is happy that the weird route is happening to Noelle, because it's making her easier to control. That does sound very evil, and as I'm saying it, I'm starting to realize that this sounds really stupid. But look, on this super duper tiny chance that Noelle is the knight, I want to have this out here so I can say that I called it, even though I'm like almost certain that it's not true. I thought of one more prediction that I wanted to throw out there that's honestly possibly even more insane than the idea of Noelle being the knight, if you can believe it. So you know how in Chapter 3, Chris gets their own solo fight against the Shadow Mantle, and in Chapter 4, Susie gets her own solo fight against Gerson? A lot of people have come to the natural conclusion that the secret boss for Chapter 5 is going to be a solo fight with Rousey. Since Rousey's character development recently has been about him discovering who he is as an individual and having his own personality, likes, dislikes, and all that stuff, a lot of people have concluded that Rousey is going to confront something related to Azrael, with Rousey basically being a clone of Azrael and all. A lot of people think that this is going to come in the form of something similar to Flowey, but here's a super crazy theory. But what if it's not just related to Azrael, and the secret boss just is Azrael? We know he's visiting soon, and Toriel did say next week just 3 days ago, but it would make sense for Azrael to come to town to visit during the festival. That is super out there. That is making some huge leaps that Azrael would be in the Dark World in some way. But like with everything else in this video, I'm just throwing stuff out there in case these wild predictions happen to be true so that I can have bragging rights. Finally, I predicted how the chapter would end, but I want to predict how it would start. And it's going to start with Sans waking up Chris and saying, "You better get up, kid, or you're going to have a bedtime." And then Chris causes the roaring just right in their room. I don't even know why I put that in there, man. I am not ready for Sans to be my stepdad. Anyway, that's all the yapping I wanted to do for now. This recording has been going on for like 40 minutes. Oh boy, this was way longer than I expected. I hope I can get this out in time for before the chapter comes out. I'm planning on streaming my playthrough of Chapter 5, so if you are not planning on playing the game yourself for whatever reason, you can follow me on Twitch, Blitz, and I'll probably do a highlight reel of my reactions to Chapter 5. Hopefully I'll get it out way sooner than I did for Chapter 4. I was just really lazy and busy with college and stuff. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an enjoyable and emotionally devastating time with Chapter 5.